Thank you again so much for being here. We greatly appreciate it. I would love to just kind of start off and ask, what does a day in the life kind of look like for you as an Attorney General?
That's a really good question, and every day is very different. There are some days where I will be in Salem and we'll be in meetings in an office and we'll work on things from criminal justice issues to consumer issues. There's other days like last week where I was back in Washington, D.C. and we were in an appellate court arguing the tariff case against the Trump administration. So depending on the day, depending on the week, yesterday I was in Bend working with the District Attorneys Association, meeting with some of our local offices that do child support and actually protect children in our court systems before coming down here to Medford.
Very nice. And then I know you guys have been doing a lot of these town halls kind of throughout the state. What are you anticipating with this town hall meeting today in Southern Oregon when the community is out? What do you think you guys are going to be able to hear from them?
Yeah, so we have the purpose really for these town halls is really to hear what's going on in community. And that's why we're really geographically moving around the state, because the things we hear is different. So if you're on the coast, you're going to hear about how the federal cuts are impacting NOAA and the fisheries, and it's seeing how the safety of the industry, the fishing industry, is being impacted by the federal cuts. In Portland, we heard a lot about the federal workforce and the stability of our federal workforce. We have heard things about what we call kind of our food supply or the food chain, where we'll talk about farmers that have contracts with the federal government that have been canceled, but they've already put crops in the ground. You talk about the folks that are delivering food assistance to people that need food, and then you hear from people who actually would be the ones who need the food and want to consume the food in this broader context of federal cuts. So it's an opportunity for us to hear from folks about what's going on in the ground, and then we can better react in our role at the Department of Justice.
And then I know I've kind of been following a little bit about these lawsuits that Oregon has been filing, as well as working with other states in the country. What can you kind of tell us about these lawsuits that you are filing with the Trump administration's actions?
Yeah, we're in this new period of time, and I just want to be real clear. There have been some Democratic presidents and Republican presidents that want to expand the executive power of the office. That's at odds with what our Constitution says. And so a lot of these lawsuits fall into different categories. Some of them are they're trying to unconstitutionally cut funds to programs that Congress has allocated, and you can't change a law that Congress allocates. Some of them are about rights. So when you, the birthright citizenship case, when you have an administration that says, hey, we're going to ignore the interpretation of the Constitution for the last 100 years, both Democrat and Republican presidents will have a lawsuit in that mindset. One of the big things that is challenging for us is we're seeing this reworking of our economy, and we're attacking working families and the affordability of everything in our community. And so the tariff lawsuit is something where it feels like these other governments are paying for it, these other manufacturers are paying for it. That's not the case. That's actually trickling down to all of us, and we're starting to see that. It's jeopardizing our economy, and it was done under an abuse of an emergency power that no other president has used. Tariffs can be very valuable if done appropriately with the safeguards for our economy as Congress intended. So we have a lawsuit saying, hey, you can't abuse an emergency power to do this. You got to go through the normal protocols to make sure that you're keeping in mind our consumers and our economy so it doesn't disrupt our supply chains.
And with those tariffs, I know we in the Southern Oregon region have seen a lot of different businesses that have been here for many years that are struggling to stock their shelves and are worried about keeping their doors open due to these tariffs. How are you seeing those affecting Oregonians throughout the state?
You've got to remember, Oregon actually is a trade surplus state. The other thing we don't think about is all the relationships that we have with other countries. So the nursery industry in Oregon is one of the largest this side of the Mississippi. We have built relationships with folks in Canada for more than 40 years, and they are pulling our products off the shelves. So that impacts our local economy. Here during the last legislative session, they moved our budget down, or our revenue projections, by more than $500 million. That's less money to our schools. That's based upon the impacts to our economy. The pharmaceutical, you think about your pharmacies, especially in rural Oregon, there are certain things that you can only get overseas, or component parts, and there are contracts that you have with reimbursement rates that you cannot change. So you have to absorb that. So it's jeopardizing the health of pharmaceutical or pharmacy companies across our state as well. So a lot of varying different impacts, then let alone what we're going to pay. The most recent example that they're looking at, the estimates, is $2,400 a year for average households in the United States. That's a lot of money.
And then kind of back to those lawsuit questions, I know a lot of people are curious, what lawsuits do you think are the most relevant for those in the Southern Oregon area?
Oh, that's a really good question. Again, I think cost of living issues are incredibly important. And so I come back to our tariffs lawsuit, which, yeah, again, tariff seems like something, that is far, far in distance away from us, but really focusing on working families and consumers in this broad space. You think about the federal cuts that are going on right now. There are significant cuts going on to the entire federal workforce that are impacting the benefits we rely upon. So think about Social Security. We had to open up a portal on a website to take the complaints that are going on from delayed claims in this mindset. And that's something that's going on across the country. Food assistance. That's another big thing, where people who need food are seeing reductions in assistance that are going out in our community. So a lot of what I would say just basic essential needs, the things that we try and take for granted.
100%. I think another big thing that people are wondering is, where do you think we are as a state and as a country right now?
I think we're grappling with, as a country, how much power do we want to have our executive to have? And that is where I think you have a president that wants to push the bounds. And I don't know why he's doing what he's doing. We're incredibly successful in court right now, and you have to prove a likelihood of prevailing on the merits. And we've won 16 preliminary injunctions. We've got 8 more on the way, and we've won a couple of other cases. So we're overwhelming right now winning in the court, which tells me that they know that. They have their own attorneys. Their attorneys are probably informing the president, hey, this probably isn't the best action. The better approach would be to go through Congress and do it lawfully. It feels as though that is a concerted effort to just expand the executive power, which again is at odds with our Constitution.
And then where do you hope in the future the state of Oregon as well as the country can be?
So the things that we have to focus on is the tools that we have within the Department of Justice. And so the one things that I'm really focused on is making sure that we're taking care of our consumers, seniors, and working families in our civil enforcement division, making sure they're not being taken advantage of, whether it's these gold bar scams that are going on right now, or whether it's Monsanto and the way that, the forever pesticides that are in our community now. We're focused on keeping communities safe. So down here, it's labor trafficking, right? It's drug trafficking. Actually focusing and targeting organized crime at the Department of Justice is something that we're reinvigorating right now. And then finally, it's really about protecting Oregon values in this lane, right? Which is when we see things that the Trump administration is doing that is unlawful, right? Holding their feet to the fire, especially when it's impacting working families and folks that can't afford it. You got to remember, those tariffs are a regressive tax on all of us.
And when you said, keeping Oregon people safe, I know down here specifically, wildfire season is a very big deal for Southern Oregonians, and it is something that is on a lot of our minds. How are you going to try and protect residents here from possibly losing coverage or being or having to pay more for coverage if something was to happen to their home?
So this is something that's going on, and there's right now on the federal side where you're seeing the cuts, and we're hearing this at our town halls, that people are very fearful about a reduction in the workforce and their own safety. So we're fighting that to make sure that as reductions are being done at the federal level, they're being done thoughtfully, they're being done in the public, and they're being done lawfully. So you have that space. When people are taken advantage of in fire loss claims, and there's systemic issues, I think of that as a consumer, protecting folks in that space. We have an entire section set up for consumer claims. In the most recent legislative session, we're successful in being able to double the amount of attorneys in our consumer protection section, because historically we've really gone after these big cases. What I want to do is focus on the day-to-day things, whether that's predatory lending issues, whether those insurance companies are taking advantage of people in the community. I want to be able to be responsive. I want our Department of Justice to be able to be responsive, have the resources to meet the needs of what are going on in the community.
And when we're talking about Oregon as a whole and Oregonians, what do you think people and citizens can do to be engaged in conversations like these and talking about issues that they may be seeing in their areas, in their towns, and even in the state?
Well, this is a tough thing to do, because a lot of the folks that we see that come to town halls or go to specific events have the flexibility in their schedule to do that. Most of us, though, are working a job in the middle of the day. We're trying to figure out what we're going to put on the table for the evening. I've got a 14-year-old. That's a mess every night, right? So we're trying to figure this out and just live life. But at the same time, you've got this incredibly important institution, our democracy, that is being challenged right now. So I think it's incumbent upon us to find those moments in time and find the commonality with people who aren't just the same party as you, and then talk about philosophically, what do we want our country to look like? What do we want our state to look like? I don't think politicians, or more often than not, I think politicians are always running against things. I think we in these roles, I think as a community, as a state, we need to be talking about what we want our state to look like.
And then I think, really honestly, is there anything else that you think that the community here, as well as all in throughout Oregon, should know about what it is that you are doing and what it is that many legislative sessions and people in the government are working to try and handle bigger issues in maybe in the Trump administration or even in the state of Oregon? What do you think is important for community members to know about that?
The only thing is, you have an Oregon Department of Justice that's looking out on behalf of all of Oregonians. I always find it incredibly humbling, and I talk about this a lot. We have people at the Department of Justice who have been working for this state, working for Oregonians for 20 more years, working on keeping our communities safe, working on protecting consumers and working families, and then protecting the rule of law, and frankly, upholding our values, whether environmental values, reproductive health, or whether it's just the expansion of this executive authority. So you have amazing people that are working on behalf of Oregonians, not taking them for granted, because they're really good human beings. And I'm proud to be a part of that team. And really, I think there is opportunity in the years ahead to kind of continue to move forward in a very positive way.
I really think my last question would be, what do you think, after doing these town halls and going all over the state, what's the next steps with these information that you get, people coming and talking to you and kind of confiding in the issues that they see? Where do you go from there?
So it depends on the issue, right? So we've seen some issues where it might be within federal employment. We learn something new, and there's an opportunity for us to react and help those individuals. What I would say is in a micro sense, kind of in a one-on-one or within a family setting. Then there are larger issues that we might hear about. I talk about that food supply issue, or we talk about how tariffs are impacting business across Oregon. Those can sometimes result in lawsuits. So the first thing that we do is, if it's something more systemic or larger, we will go back and talk with our coalition of attorneys general to see, are people tracking this? Is this happening in other states? Do we need to take action? And so it is very helpful. It also helps us be more in touch with what's going on in the different communities, so we can be, frankly, more responsive to the needs that people have. Oregon's a very diverse state. Like, what works in Portland doesn't work in Medford. I live in Corvallis. What works in Corvallis doesn't work in Salem. So I think just appreciating that as we're navigating this complex landscape.
100%. Well, I appreciate you so much for being here and answering all these questions. It's so nice to meet you and be able to have opportunities like this. And I really hope, at the town hall, you'll be able to get a lot of different perspectives today. And maybe some of these questions that I brought up with you will kind of get answered there as well.
Well, people should be proud. I am told that it's going to be one of the larger town halls that we've had. So it's very impressive.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.